Hello, folks. So I wanted to make this video because if you're anything like me, you have some sort of analysis paralysis. So you're probably trying to get all the information you can online in order to make this choice. And of course, this choice is should I get the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro as a software engineer? Am I a pro user? So I feel like I thought a lot about it and I watched a lot of different videos and collected different opinions, even used AI to do like deep research on it, and I just thought it would be useful for someone else if I posted my findings. So let's see, I have a couple of notes here. First of all, does the air get hot? So, like a lot of things here, this is very dependent on your use case, right? What are you going to be doing as a software engineer? So, one thing that could matter also is your environment, right? If you live in a hot climate, it's probably more likely that your MacBook Air is gonna have more difficulty cooling and it could get hotter. But the main thing is probably your use case. So I can tell you what I do right now. I am an intern and I'm basically in the backend team. So I have a couple of Docker instances that I'm running all the time. So a Postgres database. I have a RabbitMQ instance. I have a couple of we use Fast API on our backend, and we actually have a separate scalable celery worker instance. If you know what that is, it's basically just some separate containers that are just there to run tasks and scale and more importantly, they don't block the main backend on Fast API backend. So this workload, of course, I'm not running like a production thing. I'm just running a local system for testing, so it doesn't take a lot of memory and stuff. But in my case, I ended up going with the MacBook Air M4, of course, 24 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of um, SSD, right, storage. And this workflow has not uh, limited me, like the MacBook Air has not limited me in the slightest for this workflow. I think it's been fantastic. It handles containers seamlessly. This was actually, a point of little. I was a little bit scared because, of course, containers are not native on the Mac the way they can be on Linux and on Windows that has WSL, of course, as a backend for Docker. But on Linux, you actually have to run a bit of a virtual machine. You don't have a native kernel that can run containers, but it's been a really good experience. There's a lot of details to this. I won't get into it, but basically, the way it works right now, there used to be a lot of problems, but right now it's just fine. I actually use OrbStack, and they're fantastic. They have very good performance. I think the actual Docker desktop client is not that good, so I do recommend using OrbStack if you eventually go with it. There's like a couple of different techniques of how you can do virtualization and run containers and Mac OS and the Mac OS kernel, and the OrbStack does some of the newer, more sophisticated ones that happen to work really well. For the longest time, this didn't work really well, but now it does, so that's a relief, and it's been great. So no significant performance difference there from Windows or Linux. But yeah, the point is, of course, unless you have some really heavy workload, in your daily software engineering work, like you're training a lot of AI models with gigabytes of data, and you really need to you need you really need active cooling, basically, right? So that's the whole point. And of course, the air can get hot, but sometimes not prohibitively hot. If it's like sometimes it will peak at 80 degrees, sure, but the heat is very concentrated in the top end of the keyboard. Like you don't feel it at all near your palms. And that's good. That's by design because that's where the batteries are, and you don't want that getting hot. So it works just fine, even if when it gets hot. Of course, if it gets too hot, it starts throttling, so it's never going to explode or shouldn't cause any damage ever, stuff like that. Um, so let's see how much RAM to get. This is also something that I was thinking about for a while. Frankly, it's hard to guess. What I can tell you is that macOS is definitely more efficient than Windows, for instance, with RAM. Their memory compression algorithm seems to work really well. I never had any issues. I hear from people that have 16 gigs of RAM on their Mac that, can do similar workflows just fine. I decided, I think, of course, RAM is a very nice resource to have. Like if you want to exceed in something, you should probably do RAM. So I went with 24. It's a nice middle ground between 16 and 32. I've never had any issues. And in my workflow, I might have many different things open, like a lot of browser tabs. I'm currently using Zen browser, but I might have, Discord or multiple terminal windows and Obsidian for notes. I might have Miro for our database model and just other charts. I'm gonna have Data Grip from JetBrains for exploring the database. Of course, the Docker containers in the background, the VS Code open. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and I've never really never felt like I was running out of RAM. Um, I actually have a on the top on my menu bar. I have a little RAM percentage meter. It never really reaches 100%. Of course, I guess some swapping would kick in before it reaches 100%. And but yeah, I've checked memory pressure a couple of times when I thought that there was a lot of things open, and it was just fine. So I think 24 gigs is going to be just fine for you, unless again you do really big compilations or video editing with a lot of files, that needs to be in memory at once. Or perhaps you're trying to run a large language model that is going to require a lot of RAM, well, VRAM in this case, but because the GPU and neural processing units from Apple Silicon, I mean, they actually share the RAM. So, yeah, in those cases, you're going to need more RAM, but otherwise, I think 24 has been an amazing cushion. Storage is a different story in the sense that I really feel like it's not worth it to upgrade. Maybe you're gonna want a 1 TB for, just for having a cushion also, but I really wouldn't get more than that. I've been perfectly happy with 512 gigs. I don't have a lot of programs that I need installed, and I don't have large files that I keep in here, and I usually keep things on Google Drive, my larger long-term files. And of course, you can always have, because of the ports of the MacBook Air, at least on the M4 that I am, they are Thunderbolt 4 ports. So you can always have a USB-C connected to an NVMe SSD, like a full speed SSD, same as the one inside the MacBook, and it's going to work the same way. So you can have external drives for files that you don't access frequently, and this storage is going to be exponentially more, just cheaper than what Apple offers. And I guess this is something I didn't really touch on, but obviously, the way that Apple keeps things quote unquote affordable is that their base models are very competitive. But as soon as you start adding memory, start adding other features, the markup is massive. Like, I've seen, I think it was, Linus Tech Tips talk about how the the price of memory of RAM on Mac OS or SSD is like literally more than gold per weight, something like that. I don't remember the exact comparison, but yeah, it was something absurd like that. And there is also one other little small detail, which is about the performance of the memory itself. So the thing is, the read and write speeds of your SSD actually depend on the amount of individual NAND chips that they have. And so for that reason, I would just caution against getting the 256 gig model because it's usually a single or dual package with NAND chips. And this means that you have significantly less read and write speeds. So in the in a little spreadsheet that I have here, for example, the sequential write for 256 gigs is at around 2000 megabytes per second. And at 512 gigs, you're at 3000 uh, megabytes per second. So 50% increase, massive in terms of, memory speed for sequential write anyway. And then from 512 to 1 TB, it's from 3100 to 3350 megabytes per second. So not a big increase. So as soon as you start getting like those quad chips, where you can, just parallelize your access to memory, um, which is at the point of 512 or higher, you get a significant performance improvement there. So just be wary of that. I would steer away from the 256 gigs model, even though it is the cheapest. Um, so regarding the Pro, well, the Pro, as of right now, and I'm recording in December 2025. The Pro M5 has been announced. It's nothing special, frankly. It has the M5 chip, but that's about it. But however, we know, well, I guess we expect that in late 2026 we're going to see a redesign of the MacBook Pro, and of course later following the MacBook Air, but first and foremost MacBook Pro. And it's expected to have an OLED screen, and who knows what else. It's significant redesign that's being planned, and because of that, I would just caution against getting a MacBook Pro regardless of what is your choice, just because this redesign is coming next year, and it's probably better if you wait, just as you know the M1 was a, well, I guess it's not going to be as important, but the M1 was quite a shock compared to the previous Intel-based MacBooks, and this M6 redesign, it could be something similar. Of course, probably not in terms of raw processing power, but I do hear that they are planning to have a bigger battery, and of course, OLED's a very interesting screen because you can effectively shut down the black pixels. You get a lot of more power efficiency. So who knows, the battery might be even better. They could maybe, I don't know, they could go to 48 hours of battery as far as I'm concerned. So it's just something interesting to keep in mind. Of course, it's hard to define the precise moment where it is nice to buy. There's actually a website that kind of tracks Apple product releases and kind of tells you when it's safe to buy versus when you're getting close to a new release. I'll leave it there on the screen or in a description, but regardless, it's something to think about. Nano texture, of course, only the Pro has nano texture, and this is pretty straightforward. Apparently, if you use your MacBook outside or next to a window, have a lot of reflex on the reflections, I mean, on the screen that bother you, nano texture might be a good option. There's also, of course, people, especially people that work with visual, just design in general, digital design, say that the colors look off and a little fuzzy when you have nano texture. So, of course, I would recommend, if you're thinking about it, go to the store and check it out first, see what you think about it. It definitely wasn't for me. Speakers, of course. I have actually never had a MacBook Pro. I do hear all the time that their speakers are better. I've heard one, of course. Um, they do seem better, of course, especially the bass, since you have bigger speakers. But the MacBook Air speakers sounded great to me for things like work calls. They sounded nice and alive and very loud too, surprisingly loud for something that comes out of like the crease of the screen, and it doesn't even have like dedicated like speaker holes or whatever. So this was a no issue non-issue for me, frankly. I don't really care about speakers that much. I'm using my headphones 99% of the time, and the speakers on the MacBook Air served me just fine. They were great. Same for the microphone, by the way. I hear, of course, the Pro has more microphones and they're supposed to sound better, but my calls have been great on the MacBook Air microphone. And most of the time, at least if I'm home, I'm using a dedicated desk mic anyway. So, the screen, of course, regarding the resolution, both are equally similar and amazing. They're great, like Retina screens, 2K screens on a laptop is great. You're never gonna notice pixelation, and I certainly do notice that I can fit more stuff on my screen because everything can be smaller compared to my, for example, 1080p Windows laptop that I used previously. Just because how much more detailed the text is, I can make it smaller and still comfortably readable, so to speak. So the screen, in terms of like color accuracy and just resolution, it's not a big deal. In terms of brightness, of course, if again, if you use your laptop outside often, then the Pro might really be a better option for you because it goes up to 1,000 nits of brightness. I think the Air goes only up to 500. Frankly, I didn't have many issues with the Air brightness in in next to windows and stuff, or like inside the car on a sunny day. I could see it just fine. It wasn't like super bright, but I could see it and work just fine. Of course, if you're under direct sunlight, like sitting in the sunlight on a park, you're probably gonna have issues with the Air. But yeah, that's definitely not my use case. I hate the sun. So well, let's move on here. Oh yeah, one last thing, of course, refresh rate. Again, not really a concern for me. When I use it docked, I am connected to a 120 hertz monitor, like 27-inch monitor anyway. So I don't care about the laptop screen. It basically just stays on the side with Discord, Slack, or whatever. Um, well, in the off chance that you play some games, I guess it could matter for you. But even then, it's just hard to care about it. Like, of course, the so-called promotion and the fluidity is nice, but I really don't miss it. It's very different from my phone, where I really do feel like having 90 or 120 hertz matters a lot for the experience because it's phones are just so fluid, so animation and gesture based. The computer, at least the way I use it, MacBooks are nothing like that for me. I actually try to disable as many animations that I can. I don't like them. And so yeah, I really don't notice 60 versus 120 hertz. And of course, for online content in general, like YouTube, Twitch, Netflix, whatever you watch, it's not really ever going to be more than 60 FPS. So you're not going to notice 120 hertz in those instances either. Regarding the camera, it's actually the same camera, so no complaints there. Both have a nice 1080p camera. Both have the same backlit keyboard. I guess the MacBook Pro keyboard is a little more stylized. It has like a different separate background from the rest of the chassis, so to speak. But yeah, it's the same keyboard. Um, and the ports, of course. Again, not a big deal for me in particular. I know that for some creators, they really, really appreciate having that SD card slot because they use it often with their cameras and stuff. So again, not my case, probably not your case as a software engineer. And the HDMI is nice sometimes, but more and more I find that monitors just have a display port through a USB-C, so you plug in USB-C anyway and don't really find that much HDMI anymore. And I always carry a little dongle anyway, a very lightweight dongle that has like SD card, HDMI, gigabit Ethernet, which is actually quite important to me. But neither the Air or the Pro have it, so unlucky. But yeah, you're gonna miss that extra I/O. You're only gonna have two Thunderbolt USB-C ports on the MacBook Air. And by the way, if you're wondering, you can charge the Air on both of these USB-C ports. You don't have to use the MagSafe port. And it is 100-watt fast charging, just like the MagSafe. There's the thing about price difference. Of course, this really depends on your budget. Maybe you don't care. You're just trying to make the best choice. The Air, of course, is more affordable. But I can speak from experience here in Brazil, in particular. I had to buy from a company that imports the MacBooks. Otherwise, it would be ridiculously expensive, just like the iPhone here. Apple seems to, I don't know how much of it is just taxes and how much they're just abusing the status that Apple has in Brazil and these other third world countries, so to speak. But man, the prices are jacked up. So you either travel to buy one, or you're gonna pay a massive premium here, and maybe you're so rich that you don't care. I mean, just for you guys to have an idea, the latest Galaxy Fold that we have here, which is like I don't know, $1,000, $2,000 um for a smartphone, right? Is the same price as like the base model iPhone here, which is of course less than $1,000 in the United States and probably in Europe as well. So it's kind of crazy how much Apple products are marked up here in general. But anyway, yeah, for me, basically, I had a bit of a choice where I paid 10K in our local currency for the MacBook Air, for this version of MacBook Air, 24 gigs and everything, and I could also go with a MacBook Pro, which for 16 or 15K, which was gonna have all of the niceties, the better speakers, the better display or whatever, but it was only 16 gigs of RAM, and it seemed because it's like the base model, it did have the M4 Pro chip, which can be nice, if you're like training models and shit, and you will appreciate the extra performance. Otherwise, probably not. In my workflow, I certainly don't feel any kind of slowdown or need of extra performance when using the regular base M4 chip here from the MacBook Air. Um, but the point is, it definitely wasn't worth it. It was like a 50% price increase for less RAM, and just a bit more processing power, and the niceties of the Pro, which, like I said, many of them I didn't need. Regarding the MacBook Air itself, there's also the choice between 13 and 15 inches. This is actually a little bit misleading because the 13 is actually 13.6 inches, which is significant in my opinion. I don't know why they don't market that. They don't show that to people. But frankly, the way I've always felt about this, not only here the 15 inches is significantly more expensive, but also like it doesn't make sense to me. You're getting a MacBook Air. Part of the reason why you're getting one is because it's portable. Otherwise, you just get a Mac Mini. And frankly, I don't feel like you can get more done in a 15-inch versus a 13.6-inch screen. If I ever really do need more space, I'm going to plug it into an external screen that's going to be at the very least 24 inches, right? So the 13.6 versus 15.3 or 15.1, I don't know what it is exactly. Difference is really not that much. It's not going to be the difference between you having an extra application on half of the screen or not, most likely. So they also have the same battery life, by the way. So it's really not worth it. But I guess to each their own. And let's see, battery life. Battery life is, of course, as expected from the previous MacBook, M Apple Silicon chips MacBooks, right? It's great. It's fantastic. It lasts all day. I really would have to be trying to deplete it. Like, for example, if I just have YouTube playing, it actually has a really efficient media engine, and it would literally take like 20 hours to discharge it from 100%. So you would have to really be trying. You'd have to have like something taking like processing power in the background for real, like training AI models. I keep coming back to this, but yeah, it's one of the few heavy, workloads that I can think of for a software developer. Of course, also, running simulations or running an absurd amount of stress testing containers, maybe. But yeah, otherwise, stuff like video editing or simulation software is the only other stuff I can think about that will really stress this laptop. Well, I guess crypto mining as well. But anyway, yeah, again, really good. It's most certainly guaranteed to be an all-day battery life. Um, you can if you toggle the low power mode, frankly, it's hard to notice a difference unless you're really like multitasking, and it lasts like ridiculously. Like sometimes I keep it on low power mode all day, and I really don't notice a difference. So nothing to say there. It's just as amazing as the previous ones, as expected. And lastly, the other thing I have here is color. So there's like all these other colors. Like there's like a blue. I don't know. They have their own name for it. I forgot. There's like the beige one that's like Starlight. I forgot the bluish one, what it's called, but I didn't really like these. And basically, I either wanted black or white, which in the Mac world is silver or space black or whatever. So the MacBook Air M4 actually doesn't have space black or space gray. It does have midnight, which is kind of like a dark blue, navy blue, whatever thing that's different and very metallic looking. It's kind of nice, but I've also seen from videos and stuff that it's like a massive, massive fingerprint magnet. That thing always looks dirty, and it's also easy to scratch it, right? If you scratch it, you're going to expose the silver underneath the aluminum. So that's not very nice. And especially on the USB-C ports and the MagSafe port over time as you plug stuff in and out, it's going to wear out and going to be like silver. You can see this in multiple instances of people who review it after like 6 months or a year or whatever of usage. So I decided to go with the silver. I think it looks just as cool and it's not going to deteriorate as much, and it's also going to look cleaner more often. And so that's also easier for me to resell in the future if I want to change models. It's going to look newer, so probably going to go for a higher value. And that's about it. I also heard that the midnight can discolor after time. Uh, but yeah, I mean that's basically it. That's some of my thoughts. I guess if I were to sum it up, you have to think about what are the things you will be doing with this computer. The MacBook Air is supposed to be like a very mobile, but still quite of a workhorse, and it's only really going to struggle under like sustained high workloads. Like think as if you were trying to game AAA games all the time on it. Then yeah, it's going to heat up, it's going to throttle, it's going to have less battery life than the Pro that has active cooling. But for most people, most software engineers, I really feel like at this point in time, Apple Silicon has gotten so good that you really don't need a Pro. You can get away with the MacBook Air just fine. So yeah, these are my thoughts. These are the things that I mainly looked at when comparing the two. Um, in my experience, by the way, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest, professional. I'm only an intern. I am going to my seventh semester of computer science, and I am a backend software engineer intern. But yeah, like I said, I do deal with a lot of, how would I say this? Just generic, like well known, it's not well known, but like the usual backend workflow, so to speak, that you could think of when you think of a backend engineer. I have a lot of Docker running. I have to run unit tests, and I have to open multiple files in my code editor, and I have to have linters and formatters running, and none of this can be slow. Like console commands booting up my UVcorn server for SAPI for a fast API can't take time. Spinning up those Celery containers to run tasks and process certain various things can't take time. And the MacBook Air has never really disappointed me. So yeah, think about your use case. Think about some of the things that I said, and I think you just can't go wrong. You'll make a great choice. Catch you next time.